Welcome back to another episode of Book Central Inside the Pages. I'm your host, Abbie, and as always, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Today, I'm particularly excited because we have a truly special guest, someone whose work has inspired readers around the world. He's written best-selling non-fiction books on a wide range of topics, from personal growth to business strategies. If you've ever felt stuck or unsure about how to turn your expertise into a compelling book, today's episode is one you won't want to miss. Joining me is none other than the brilliant John Palmer. We're going to dive into the art of writing non-fiction, how to get started, stay motivated, and, of course, how to finish a book that will make an impact. So, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Abbie. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Writing is something I'm incredibly passionate about, and I love helping others discover their own writing journey.
We're thrilled to have you, John. I know our listeners are eager to hear from someone with your experience. Let's jump right into it. Non-fiction can feel like an enormous task for many people. Often, they don't even know where to begin. So, my first question is, if someone is thinking about writing a non-fiction book, what's the very first step they should take? Should they be focusing on research, writing down ideas, or something else entirely?
That's a really good place to start, Abbie. The very first step, in my opinion, is to get clear on your purpose why you're writing the book. I see a lot of aspiring authors who have great knowledge about a subject but don't take the time to figure out the bigger picture. You want to ask yourself questions like, what's the main message I want to share, and who am I writing this for? For instance, if you're writing a book on personal finance, your purpose might be to help people get out of debt or manage their money better. Your audience might be young professionals or families. Once you have that clarity, you'll find that the content starts to take shape more naturally because you're writing with a specific goal and reader in mind.
That's a fantastic way to look at it. I feel like a lot of first-time writers just dive in, thinking, I know my subject matter well, but they don't necessarily have a clear vision of the end goal. So, let's say someone has defined their purpose. They know their audience, they've identified the problem their book will address. What happens next? Is it time to dive into research and writing, or should they focus more on planning first?
Once you're clear on your purpose, I'd recommend starting with a planning phase. It's tempting to dive straight into writing, but without a solid structure, it's easy to get lost along the way. I suggest creating an outline, which serves as a roadmap for your book. Break your book down into sections or chapters. Each chapter should focus on a specific theme or subtopic that supports your overall message. For example, if you're writing that personal finance book, your chapters might include topics like budgeting, saving, investing, and managing debt. This way, you have a clear structure to follow, and it also makes the writing process feel a lot more manageable.
That sounds really helpful. I can imagine that having that roadmap in place prevents a lot of the overwhelm that comes with tackling a big project like a book. It's like having a blueprint to follow.
Exactly. It's all about breaking it down into bite-sized pieces. With an outline, each chapter becomes its own mini-project, which makes the entire book less daunting. And you can always revise the outline as you go, but having that initial structure helps you stay focused.
So, now that we've got the outline, let's talk about the writing itself. You've written multiple bestsellers, and I'm sure you've developed a writing routine that works for you. Can you walk us through your writing process? How do you stay disciplined, especially when life gets busy, and the motivation isn't always there?
Oh, absolutely. Writing a book is a marathon, not a sprint, so it's crucial to find a routine that works for you. For me, consistency is key. I set aside dedicated time every day to write, even if it's just an hour. The important thing is to make writing a habit. Some people are night owls, others are morning people. Find when you're most productive and block out that time. I also recommend giving yourself permission to write a bad first draft. A lot of writers get stuck because they're trying to make the first draft perfect, but perfection is the enemy of progress. The first draft is about getting your ideas down on paper. You can always go back and polish it later.
That's great advice. It's so easy to fall into the trap of editing while you're writing, which can really slow down progress. Speaking of first drafts, I know a lot of aspiring authors struggle with self-doubt. They might start writing and think, who am I to write this book? Or what if nobody cares about what I have to say? How do you suggest they overcome that kind of doubt?
That's such an important question, and it's something every writer deals with at some point. Imposter syndrome is real, especially in non-fiction, where you're positioning yourself as knowledgeable or experienced in a particular field. My advice is to remember that everyone has a unique perspective, and your experience or knowledge is valuable, even if you don't think you're the world's top expert. You don't need to be the foremost authority on a subject to write about it. You just need to offer something helpful or insightful to your readers. Focus on the value you can provide, rather than worrying about whether you're qualified enough. If you have knowledge or experience that can help even one person, you've got a story worth telling.
That's really encouraging, John. I think a lot of people needed to hear that. Now, once the first draft is finished, the next big hurdle is editing. What's your approach to editing? Do you self-edit, or do you recommend hiring a professional editor right away?
Both are important, but they serve different purposes. I always start with a self-edit because it gives me a chance to tighten up my writing before sending it off to someone else. Look for places where you can clarify your ideas, eliminate redundancy, or strengthen your arguments. Once I've gone through the draft a few times, that's when I bring in a professional editor. A professional editor brings a fresh perspective. They can spot things you've missed, offer suggestions for improving the flow, and help you fine-tune your message. It's hard to see your own work objectively after you've been so immersed in it for so long, so having someone else review it is incredibly valuable.
That's great to hear. And what about working with an editor? How should authors approach that relationship? I know it can be hard to hear constructive criticism, especially when it's something as personal as your book.
It can be tough, but the key is to remember that the editor is there to help you improve your work. Be open to their feedback, even if it's difficult to hear. That said, it's also important to communicate your vision for the book upfront. The better your editor understands what you're trying to achieve, the more effectively they can help you get there.
That's great advice. Now, let's switch gears and talk about publishing. I know a lot of listeners are probably wondering whether they should go the traditional publishing route or self-publish. What's your take on that?
This is a big decision, and both routes have their pros and cons. Traditional publishing gives you the advantage of working with a publisher who handles things like distribution, cover design, and marketing. However, it can be a long and competitive process to get a publishing deal, and even then, you don't have as much control over the final product. Self-publishing, on the other hand, gives you full control over every aspect of your book, from the content to the cover design to the marketing strategy. You also typically get higher royalties per sale. The downside is that you're responsible for everything: production, marketing, distribution, the whole shebang. So, it really depends on what your goals are and what resources you have available.
That's definitely something to think about. And speaking of marketing, that's often where many self-published authors struggle. Do you have any tips for promoting a non-fiction book, especially if you're self-publishing?
Marketing can feel like a whole other mountain to climb, but it's essential. One of the best things you can do is start building your audience long before the book is even finished. This could be through a blog, a YouTube channel, a podcast, or social media platforms. Engage with your audience, offer value, and create a community around your expertise. That way, when it comes time to launch your book, you already have a group of people who are excited to buy it. Also, don't underestimate the power of reviews and word of mouth. Reach out to people in your field, ask for reviews, and leverage those reviews for social proof.
That's such a smart approach. Build the audience first, then release the book. Well, John, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. I'm sure our listeners have gained so much insight from your advice, and I hope they're feeling ready to tackle their non-fiction project.
It's been my pleasure, Abbie. I hope everyone listening feels more confident in their ability to write a non-fiction book. The world needs more voices and more stories, so don't be afraid to share yours.
Absolutely. Thanks again, John. And to our listeners, if you want to learn more about John's work or pick up one of his bestsellers, be sure to check out the links in the show notes. As always, thank you for tuning in to Book Central Inside the Pages. Until next time, keep writing, keep reading, and keep pushing forward. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click the bell. See you next week.